Imagine a universe where the most feared words in any language are not threats of violence or promises of destruction. No, the three words that make entire star systems go silent, that cause ancient civilizations to lock their doors and pray to forgotten gods, are far simpler. Humans remember everything. They say memory is the mother of all wisdom, but for humanity, it became something far more dangerous. While other species forgot their debts, their favors, their promises made in the dark between stars, humans kept ledgers. Not just written records, but something deeper, a collective memory that passed from generation to generation like a genetic inheritance of honor and obligation. The galaxy learned this truth the hard way when they discovered that helping a single human child didn't just earn you a friend. It earned you an ally that would follow your bloodline across centuries, ready to repay that kindness with the full might of their expanding civilization. But what happens when that same terrifying loyalty is betrayed? When those who once called humans their saviors decide they've grown too powerful, too threatening to the established order. You're about to discover why the galaxy's oldest species whisper a warning to their young. Cross a human if you must, but never, ever break a promise to one. For their gratitude can move mountains, and their vengeance can shatter suns. This is the story of the day the universe learned that humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology, their adaptability, or their stubborn refusal to surrender. It was their memory, and some debts, once betrayed, can only be paid in full with the extinction of stars themselves. The Cathar A mining station orbited the gas giant Helios Prime like a metallic parasite, its sprawling arms extending deep into the planet's atmospheric layers to harvest the rare xenon compounds that powered faster-than-light travel. Captain Zeph Karan stood on the observation deck, watching the swirling storms below through reinforced transparent steel, when the emergency beacon began its piercing wail. The sound cut through the station's constant hum like a blade through flesh. Zeph's secondary hearts skipped in rhythm as red warning lights bathed the corridor in crimson urgency. His four arms moved with practiced efficiency, activating his personal communicator while his third eye focused on the tactical display materializing before him. Station control, this is Captain Karan. Report status immediately. Sir, we've detected a massive debris field approximately 2 million kilometers off our starboard sensors. Energy signatures suggest recent combat. We're also picking up, sir, there appears to be a survival pod, but the design is completely unknown. Zeph's mandibles clicked together in concentration. Unknown ship designs were rare in this sector of the galaxy. The Galactic Federation had cataloged nearly every spacefaring species within 1,000 light years, and those few remaining independent civilizations kept to themselves. An unknown vessel meant either a very lost explorer or something far more concerning. Initiate rescue protocols. Bring the pod to Docking Bay 7 and establish a quarantine field. I want full biological and technological scans before we open anything. The Cathar A were a cautious species by nature. Their homeworld had taught them that survival meant careful consideration of every risk. When their ancestors had first achieved spaceflight, they had encountered 3 hostile alien species in rapid succession. Only their methodical approach to first contact had prevented their extinction. Now, as one of the Federation's most trusted member species, they applied that same caution to everything. 20 minutes later, Zeph stood in the quarantine bay, studying the strange pod through the containment field. The vessel was unlike anything in the Federation databases. Where most species favored smooth, curved hulls or angular geometric designs, this craft appeared almost organic. Its surface was a mottled gray-brown that reminded him of his homeworld's mountain stones, but sensors indicated it was some kind of advanced metal alloy. Most puzzling were the markings along its side. They weren't the flowing scripts of the Altari, nor the geometric patterns favored by the crystalline Vorth. These symbols appear to have been burned directly into the hull, forming letters and numbers that followed no linguistic pattern in the Universal Translation Matrix. Captain, called Dr. Veleth, the station's chief xenobiologist. Her voice carried the harmonic undertones that indicated extreme curiosity among her people. The biological scans are fascinating. There's a single life form inside, definitely sentient based on brain activity patterns. The physiology is remarkable. Elaborate, doctor. The being appears to be bipedal, carbon-based, with an internal skeletal structure. But Captain, the muscular and cardiovascular systems are unlike anything we've encountered. The bone density suggests evolution under significant gravity, possibly twice our homeworld standard. And the brain patterns. She paused, her sensory tendrils twitching with excitement. The neural complexity rivals our own, but the architecture is completely different. This species appears to have evolved from predatory stock. Zeph absorbed this information while studying the pod's construction. Whatever species had built this vessel possessed impressive engineering skills. Despite obvious battle damage, the life support systems were still functioning, and the hull had maintained integrity through what must have been a devastating attack. Any response to our standard greeting protocols? Negative, sir. However, I'm detecting what might be a distress signal. It's broadcasting on multiple frequencies in mathematical sequences. Primes, Fibonacci numbers, fundamental constants. This species definitely understands universal mathematical principles. The decision weighed heavily on Zeph's mind. Federation protocols for unknown species required extensive preparation, council approval, and careful diplomatic procedures. But those same protocols also mandated immediate assistance to beings in distress. The pod's life support was failing. Whatever was inside would be dead within 6 hours without intervention. Dr. Veleth, prepare your team for first contact procedures. I want full defensive measures in place, but we're bringing them aboard. No sentient being dies on my watch while I have the power to prevent it. 2 hours later, the pod's occupant lay unconscious on a medical bed in the station's advanced care facility. Zeph studied the being through the observation window, his 4 eyes taking in every detail of this remarkable new species. The creature was indeed bipedal, standing perhaps 6 feet in height, even while lying down. Its skin was a pale brown color, with darker hair covering the top of its head and face. Unlike the scaled or chitinous exteriors of most galactic species, this being's covering appeared to be some kind of flexible tissue. Its facial features were alien, yet somehow expressive, with 2 forward-facing eyes that suggested the predatory evolution Dr. Veleth had mentioned. Most intriguing were the being's clothes. Despite the obvious trauma it had endured, the fabric and materials were of exceptional quality. The symbols and insignia suggested some kind of military or exploration organization, though their meaning remained a mystery. Captain, Dr. Veleth's voice came through the intercom. The being is regaining consciousness. Brain activity indicates high intelligence, and what appears to be emotional distress, likely related to whatever destroyed their vessel. Through the window, Zeph watched as the creature's eyes fluttered open. They were a striking blue color, unlike anything in known xenobiology. The being sat up slowly, its movements cautious but alert. When it noticed the observation window, those alien eyes met Zeph's own with an intensity that sent an involuntary shiver through his exoskeleton. The creature spoke, its voice carrying through the medical bay's communication system. The words were meaningless to the universal translator, but the tone was unmistakable. This was a being accustomed to command, someone used to being in control of dangerous situations. Initialize basic communication protocols, Zeph ordered. Start with mathematical concepts and work toward linguistic patterns. And, Doctor, activate the emergency beacon. The Federation Council needs to know about this immediately. As the hours passed, the communication attempts began to yield results. The being, through a combination of mathematical concepts, basic pictographs, and patient repetition, managed to convey several crucial pieces of information. Its name, as closely as the translator could approximate, was Marcus, or something similar. It came from a species that called itself human in their own language. The revelation that shook Zeph to his core came when Marcus managed to communicate the nature of his people. Through careful questioning and patient translation work, they learned that humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were refugees. Their homeworld had been attacked, their colonies scattered, their people driven from their homes by an alliance of species that feared human expansion. But it was Marcus's final communication attempt that left the entire station stunned. Using the medical bay's display systems, he drew a map of local space, marking the location of the battle that had destroyed his ship. Then, with trembling fingers, he indicated the direction his attackers had gone, toward the Kethar homeworld. The same species that had tried to commit genocide against humanity was now moving towards Zeph's own people. The irony was not lost on any of them. by saving this human. The Keithara had potentially saved themselves from walking blindly into the same trap that had devastated Marcus's homeworld. As emergency protocols activated throughout the mining station and urgent messages flashed toward both the Federation Council and the Keithara home fleet, Zeph made a decision that would echo through galactic history. He opened a direct communication channel to Marcus, bypassing all normal first contact procedures. "Human Marcus," he said, using the being's own name for his species. "Your enemies are moving toward my homeworld. My people number in the billions. Your warning may have saved them all. The Keithara do not forget those who preserve our lives." Marcus's response, filtered through the improving translation matrix, was simple but profound. "Neither do humans, Captain. Neither do humans." What neither being could know in that moment was that they had just forged the first link in a chain of debt and obligation that would reshape the galaxy. The Keithara had saved a human life, and humans never forgot such debts. But more immediately, a human had warned the Keithara of approaching genocide, and the Keithara never forgot their obligations either. In the depths of space, the wheels of a larger conflict were already turning. The same alliance that had driven humanity from their homes was moving to eliminate another species that might threaten their dominance. But now they faced something they had not anticipated. Two species bound together by mutual debt, each carrying the other's survival as a sacred obligation. The war that was coming would test more than just military might and technological superiority. It would test the very concept of honor, debt, and the bonds that could form between species separated by millions of years of evolution, but united by the simple recognition that some things transcended the vast darkness between stars. As Marcus recovered his strength and began sharing what he knew of human technology and tactics, and as the Keithara prepared their defenses with newfound urgency, neither species realized they were writing the first chapter of a legend that would spread throughout the galaxy. They were creating the foundation of an alliance that would prove one simple truth. In a universe of countless species and endless conflicts, the most powerful force was not hatred or fear, but the simple act of remembering who had stood beside you in the darkness. The debt was recorded, witnessed, and remembered. And across the galaxy, ancient species who had grown comfortable in their dominance began to stir uneasily, sensing that something fundamental had changed in the balance of power among the stars. 3 weeks after Marcus's rescue, the first signs of the approaching storm reached Keith Prime. Long-range sensors detected the characteristic energy signatures of the Sovereignty Coalition fleet moving through the outer systems. The same alliance that had shattered human civilization was now bearing down on the Keithara homeworld with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Admiral Thex Koroveth stood in the command center of the orbital defense platform Steadfast Guardian, watching the tactical displays with growing unease. The coalition force was massive, over 800 ships of various configurations, representing 6 different species united in their belief that aggressive younger races posed a threat to galactic stability. They had perfected the art of overwhelming force, striking fast and hard before their targets could mount effective resistance. "Admiral," reported Commander Yill from the sensor station, "we've completed analysis of the fleet composition. Primary force consists of Altari dreadnoughts, Vorth crystal carriers, and Nexari siege platforms. Supporting vessels include Corlani fast attack ships and Zelthian electronic warfare frigates. Combined firepower exceeds our planetary defenses by a factor of 12. The numbers were sobering, but Admiral Koroveth had lived through the early days of Keithara spaceflight when impossible odds were simply another engineering problem to solve. She activated the fleet-wide communication channel, her voice carrying the calm authority that had made her legendary among her people. "All ships, all stations. This is Admiral Koroveth. Today we face an enemy that has grown fat on easy victories against unprepared civilizations. They come to our world believing we will fall as easily as the humans they scattered 3 months ago. They are wrong." She paused, allowing her words to reach every Keithara vessel in the system. "Our human ally Marcus has shared with us the tactical data from his people's final battles. We know their formations, their standard attack patterns, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The enemy approaches expecting another helpless victim. Instead, they will find Keithara defenders who have learned from human sacrifice and human wisdom. In the weeks since his rescue, Marcus had proven invaluable beyond anyone's initial expectations. His species might have been driven from their homes, but they had not been conquered easily. The tactical information he provided revealed a truth that chilled every military analyst who studied it. Humanity had fought the Coalition to a standstill multiple times before being overwhelmed by sheer numbers and the coordinated assault on multiple colonies simultaneously. The humans had developed innovative technologies born from desperation and refined through brutal necessity. Their ships were smaller than Coalition vessels, but faster and more maneuverable. Their weapons were less powerful individually, but could be concentrated with devastating effect. Most importantly, their tactical doctrine emphasized adaptability and creative problem-solving over rigid adherence to established battle plans. Marcus had spent sleepless weeks working with HFY engineers, sharing every technical innovation his people had developed during their losing war. Adaptive shielding matrices that could redistribute energy across multiple frequency bands. Gravitational distortion mines that could tear apart formation flying. Electronic warfare packages that could turn the Coalition's own communication networks against them. But perhaps most valuable was Marcus's insight into the psychological weaknesses of the Coalition species. The Altari were arrogant, prone to overextending when they sensed easy victory. The Vorth were methodical, but inflexible, unable to adapt quickly when their crystalline computer networks were disrupted. The Nexari relied heavily on their siege platforms, but became vulnerable when forced into close-quarters combat. Admiral. Marcus's voice came through the command center speakers. He had been granted an advisory position despite his status as an unknown alien, a decision that had required considerable political maneuvering within the HFY government. Coalition fleet is maintaining standard approach formation. They're not expecting resistance. This is our advantage. Admiral Koroveth studied the human through the tactical display. In 3 weeks, Marcus had learned enough of their language to communicate effectively, though the universal translator still smoothed the rougher edges of cross-species conversation. His dedication to repaying what he saw as a life debt had impressed even the most xenophobic members of the Defense Council. Human Marcus, your people fought these same ships for months. What would they have done with the defensive advantages we possess? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his alien features thoughtful. My people learned that the Coalition expects fear. They use terror as a weapon, broadcasting the destruction of captured worlds to demoralize their next target. They've never fought an enemy that treated their approach as an opportunity rather than a death sentence. The tactical plan that emerged from the collaboration between human innovation and HFY engineering was unlike anything in standard military doctrine. Instead of meeting the Coalition fleet head-on or retreating to a purely defensive posture, they would allow the enemy to believe their advance was proceeding exactly as planned, right up until the moment it became a trap. The HFY had converted 17 mining platforms in the outer system into automated weapons platforms, each one equipped with human-designed gravitational mines and adaptive shielding. These platforms would remain powered down and virtually undetectable until the Coalition fleet passed their positions. The main battle fleet would appear to retreat toward the inner system, drawing the enemy into an increasingly confined space where their numerical superiority would become a disadvantage. Most innovative was the use of HFY industrial infrastructure as weapons of war. The massive refineries orbiting the gas giant Helios Prime could be overloaded to create artificial supernovae, while the asteroid mining facilities could launch payloads of raw or at significant fractions of light speed. The Coalition expected to face a military defense. Instead, they would find an entire solar system weaponized against them. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Coalition fleet, reported the communications officer. They're broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies. Put it through, but maintain communication silence until I give the order. The main display shimmered and resolved into the image of an Altari fleet commander. The being's elongated skull and silvery skin marked it as one of the Coalition's primary species, while the elaborate ceremonial armor indicated high rank within their military hierarchy. When it spoke, its voice carried the harmonics of absolute certainty. Inferior species of the HFY worlds, you will surrender immediately or face total annihilation. Your civilization has been judged a threat to galactic stability through your association with the criminal human refugees. Surrender now, and your people will be relocated to appropriate reservations. Resist, and your worlds will be sterilized as an example to other aggressive species. Admiral Koroveth looked at Marcus, seeing the flash of rage that crossed his alien features. She had learned enough about human facial expressions to recognize the emotion, and it matched her own feelings perfectly. The casual dismissal, the assumption that they would simply accept destruction or slavery, it was exactly the arrogance Marcus had warned them to expect. Marcus, your people faced this same ultimatum multiple times. How did they respond? The human's reply was quiet, but carried an undertone that made Admiral Koroveth's sensory tendrils tingle with anticipation. Admiral, there's an old human saying, the only appropriate response to a threat of genocide is the complete destruction of those who make it. My people never surrendered. We died fighting, but we never surrendered. Admiral Koroveth activated the communication channel, her four arms working across the control interfaces as she prepared to deliver the Keith-RA response to the Coalition ultimatum. Around the command center, junior officers fell silent, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would define their species for generations to come. Coalition Commander, this is Admiral Thex Koroveth of the Keith-RA Defense Forces. Your ultimatum has been received and reviewed. Our response is as follows. Any species that threatens genocide against peaceful civilizations forfeits all claim to mercy or quarter. You came here expecting to find helpless victims. Instead, you have found Keith-RA defenders armed with human weapons and human resolve. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to reach every ship in both fleets. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We do not forgive. Advance on our worlds if you dare, but know that every Keith-RA who falls will be avenged tenfold. Human Marcus of the scattered human fleets stands with us today, and his people's sacrifice will not be forgotten or unavenged. The Coalition Commander's expression shifted from arrogance to confusion to dawning concern. The Altari were accustomed to easy capitulation or desperate, uncoordinated resistance. This calm declaration of mutual destruction was outside their experience. You align yourself with the human plague, your species will share their fate, extinction, and example to any who would challenge the established order. Admiral Koroveth's mandibles clicked in what any Keith-RA would recognize as a combat smile. Commander, you misunderstand the situation. We do not align ourselves with human refugees. We have adopted human tactics, human weapons, and human determination. Your people taught humanity to fight for survival. Today, we will show you what that education has created. The transmission ended, and the Coalition fleet began its final approach toward Keith Prime. But something had changed in the dynamic of the approaching battle. The Coalition forces were no longer facing a routine extermination operation. They were entering combat against an enemy that had learned from human desperation and adapted it to Keith-RA ingenuity. In the depths of space, 17 mining platforms powered up their weapon systems and prepared to demonstrate that the difference between industrial equipment and instruments of war was often simply a matter of perspective. The asteroid mining facilities began accelerating their payloads toward calculated interception points, while the refineries around Helios Prime began building toward the controlled explosions that would reshape the battlefield. Marcus stood beside Admiral Koroveth, watching the tactical displays with the focused intensity of someone who had seen his homeworld burn. Admiral, they're beginning their standard formation attack. Altari dreadnoughts leading, Vorth carriers in support position, siege platforms moving to bombardment range. Exactly as you predicted. All ships, prepare for Operation Memory Keeper. Today we honor the human dead by ensuring their sacrifice was not meaningless. The battle that was about to begin would prove that debt and memory could be forged into weapons as devastating as any technology. The Coalition had scattered humanity across the galaxy, but in doing so, they had planted the seeds of their own destruction among species who understood the value of alliance and the power of gratitude. As the first energy bolts began crossing the void between fleets, Admiral Koroveth activated the emergency beacon that would carry news of this battle throughout the galaxy. Whatever the outcome, every species would learn that the Coalition was not invincible, and that the bonds forged between desperate allies could withstand even the overwhelming force of ancient empires. The debt was about to be paid in full. The Battle of Keith Prime began with the Coalition fleet's traditional show of force, a synchronized barrage from their dreadnoughts designed to shatter planetary defenses and break enemy morale before the real fighting started. Massive energy beams lanced across space, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small moon. The Altari commander expected to see defensive platforms exploding and enemy ships scattering in terror. Instead, the beam struck seemingly empty space where Kithara projector arrays created false targets while the real defensive platforms remained hidden behind layers of stealth technology adapted from human designs. The Coalition's opening salvo struck nothing but carefully crafted illusions. All platforms, execute Memory Keeper 1. Admiral Koroveth commanded from her position on the Steadfast Guardian. Around the system, 17 mining platforms that had remained dark and undetected suddenly blazed to life. Gravitational distortion mines, invisible to Coalition sensors, activated in perfect coordination as the enemy fleet passed through their deployment zone. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Vorth crystal carriers, with their perfectly ordered formations, found their ships being pulled in directions their crystalline navigation systems couldn't compensate for fast enough. Two carriers collided at significant fractions of light speed, their crystal hulls shattering like glass sculptures dropped on stone. The debris field from their destruction caught 3 Corlani fast-attack ships, shredding their lightweight hulls and leaving their crews exposed to vacuum. Marcus watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Admiral, that's 15% of their frontline strength eliminated in the opening 30 seconds. The humans who died at New Terra and Kepler's Hope have been avenged already. But the Coalition was not composed of species that had survived galactic politics for millennia without learning to adapt to unexpected threats. The Altari fleet commander immediately shifted formation, spreading his ships to minimize the impact of area effect weapons while launching pro-drones to map the hidden minefields. Predictable, Admiral Koroveth observed. Marcus, your people faced this same tactical shift at the Battle of Rigel 7. What was their response? We made them pay for every adaptation, Marcus replied, his alien features set with determination. They spread out to avoid mines? We concentrated our fire to punch through their dispersed defenses. They sent probes to map the battlefield. We fed their sensors false information while repositioning our real assets. The second phase of the battle began as Kithara's ships emerged from concealment among the asteroid fields. But these weren't the standard military vessels the Coalition expected. Mining ships fitted with human-designed weapon systems, cargo haulers converted to missile platforms, and industrial vessels modified to launch clouds of metallic chaff at relativistic speeds. Each ship carried weapons that no military engineer would have designed, but which were devastatingly effective in ways that no standard tactical doctrine could counter. The converted mining vessel, or breaker, demonstrated the principle perfectly. Its industrial-grade gravitational manipulation systems, designed to break apart asteroids for processing, proved remarkably effective at crushing Coalition ships, whose shields were calibrated to deflect energy weapons rather than resist directed gravitational forces. An Altari light cruiser found itself compressed to a fraction of its original size before its reactor containment failed and added another expanding fireball to the battle zone. The Nexari siege platforms responded by targeting the asteroid fields themselves, attempting to eliminate the cover that allowed the Kithara ships to appear and disappear seemingly at will. Their massive particle beam weapons turned dozens of asteroids into glowing slag, creating a visual spectacle that would have terrified most offenders. Admiral Koroveth activated the communication channel to the human advisor. Marcus, they're eliminating our cover exactly as your tactical projections indicated. Time for Memory Keeper 2. Yes, Admiral. Show them what happens when they destroy the things we're using to hide behind. The asteroids that the Nexari siege platforms had just finished destroying had not been random chunks of rock and metal. They were carefully selected bodies with specific mineral compositions, chosen for the gases they would release when superheated. As the vaporized asteroid material spread through the battle zone, it created an electromagnetic interference field that disrupted Coalition sensors and communication networks. Suddenly, the technologically superior Coalition fleet found itself fighting blind. Their advanced targeting systems couldn't lock onto enemies they couldn't detect, while their carefully coordinated tactics fell apart when ship commanders couldn't communicate with each other effectively. The Kithara ships, equipped with human-designed backup systems that relied on quantum entanglement rather than electromagnetic communication, maintained perfect coordination. They moved through the interference field like predators hunting confused prey, striking at isolated coalition vessels, and disappearing before return fire could be coordinated. But it was the arrival of unexpected reinforcements that transformed the battle from a clever defensive action into something far more significant. Long-range sensors detected ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Vessels with the distinctive heat signatures of human technology, but flying in formations that suggested major fleet elements rather than scattered refugees. "Admiral," the sensor operator reported with barely controlled excitement, "I'm reading 47 ships of unknown configuration approaching at attack speed. Energy signatures match the human vessel we recovered, but these are warships, not exploration craft." Marcus stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "That's impossible. The Coalition scattered my people 3 months ago. There weren't any major fleet elements left intact." The answer came in a transmission that reached the Kithare fleet on human communication frequencies. The voice that spoke was clearly human, but carried an authority that suggested years of combat command and absolute determination. "Kithare defenders, this is Admiral Sarachun of a human resistance fleet. We received your emergency beacon and Marcus's situation report. The rumors of humanity's destruction have been greatly exaggerated. We've been gathering our scattered forces for months, and your courage in standing against the Coalition has given us the rally point we needed." Admiral Koroveth felt her 4 hearts racing as the implications became clear. The human fleet wasn't just a collection of refugees seeking revenge. These were military units that had been conducting guerrilla operations across Coalition space, striking at supply lines and gathering intelligence while appearing to be nothing more than scattered survivors. "Human Admiral Chun, this is Admiral Koroveth. Your Marcus has been instrumental in our defense. We stand ready to coordinate our efforts. Admiral, Marcus trained under my command before the fall of New Terra. If he's been helping you prepare, then the Coalition is about to learn why humanity doesn't stay beaten. All human ships execute Operation Debt Repaid. Show them what we've learned about gratitude." The human fleet split into 3 formations, each one targeting a different aspect of the Coalition force. Fast attack ships moved to engage the scattered Corlani vessels, while heavy cruisers focused on the remaining Vorth crystal carriers. But it was the human flagship and her escorts that moved toward the Altari dreadnoughts with an aggression that bordered on suicidal. Marcus watched his people's ships closing with the enemy, and felt something that had been missing since the fall of his homeworld: hope. Admiral Chun is executing the Terran Gambit. It's a tactic we developed when fighting impossible odds. Use superior maneuverability to get inside the enemy's weapon range where their heavy guns can't track us. The Altari dreadnoughts were devastating at long range, but their massive weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat at distances measured in thousands of kilometers. When the human ships closed to point-blank range and began strafing runs along the dreadnoughts' hulls, those same weapons became liabilities. The Altari ships couldn't bring their main batteries to bear without risking damage to their own vessels. But the humans had learned more than just tactics during their months of guerrilla warfare. They had developed technologies born from desperation and refined through necessity. Their ships launched swarms of micromissiles that could navigate inside enemy shield grids, while their energy weapons had been modified to penetrate Coalition armor by targeting specific molecular weaknesses that human scientists had identified through analysis of captured debris. The tide of battle shifted with stunning rapidity. The Coalition forces, which had entered the system expecting another routine extermination operation, found themselves fighting for their lives against enemies who had turned defensive warfare into an art form. Every advantage the Coalition possessed, superior numbers, heavier weapons, established tactics, was being systematically neutralized by opponents who had learned to see weakness where others saw strength. The moment that defined the battle came when the Nexari siege platforms, frustrated by their inability to target the elusive defenders, began preparing to bombard Keith Prime directly. The massive weapons were designed to crack planetary crusts and boil oceans. Against a populated world, they would cause casualties in the billions. Admiral Chen's response was immediate and devastating. All human ships, priority target designation. Those siege platforms threaten the people who saved Marcus. That is unacceptable. What followed was a coordinated assault that demonstrated why humanity had survived 3 months of what was supposed to be total annihilation. Human ships that had been conducting hit and run attacks suddenly, concentrated their fire with surgical precision. The siege platforms, built for orbital bombardment rather than fleet engagement, found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy that fought with the fury of those who had already lost everything once and refused to lose anything again. The first siege platform exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations that lit up the system like a new star. The second managed to fire one shot before human missiles penetrated its armor and turned its reactor into expanding plasma. The third attempted to retreat, but found its path blocked by Kithare mining ships that had emerged from the asteroid fields to exact their own vengeance. As the siege platforms died, taking with them the Coalition's ability to threaten the planet directly, Admiral Korveth opened a channel to the human fleet commander. Admiral Chun, your people honor the debt we owe each other. How may the Kithare serve in this battle? The human's response carried a warmth that transcended species barriers. Admiral, your people saved one of ours when they could have ignored his distress signal. Today, we save each other. All ships, execute Memory Keeper 3. Show the galaxy what happens when you threaten those who stand by their obligations. The final phase of the Battle of Keith Prime would be remembered as the moment when two desperate species discovered that their combined strength was greater than the sum of their individual capabilities. Human tactical innovation merged with Kithare engineering precision to create weapons and strategies that neither species could have developed alone. The Coalition fleet, reduced to less than half its original strength, and facing an enemy that grew stronger with every passing minute, began the process that would define their relationship with humanity for generations to come. They attempted to retreat, but retreat was no longer an option. The debt had been called in, and payment was due in full. The Coalition fleet's attempted retreat became a rout when Admiral Chun transmitted a message on all frequencies that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Her voice carried the cold fury of someone who had watched worlds burn and counted the cost in billions of lives. Coalition forces, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Resistance Fleet. You came to this system to commit genocide against the Kithare people because they dare to show mercy to one human survivor. You have made a critical error. You have confused humanity's dispersal with our destruction. Today, you learn the difference. The human ships that had seemed scattered and uncoordinated suddenly revealed themselves as elements of a massive fleet that had been using Keith Prime as a convergence point. From hyperspace emergence points throughout the system, human vessels appeared in groups of 20 and 30 ships. These weren't refugees or survivors. They were the concentrated military might of a species that had spent 3 months learning to fight an enemy they had never expected to face. Marcus stood beside Admiral Korveth, watching the tactical display with emotions that cycled between vindication and sorrow. Admiral, those are the survivors of 12 different human colonies. Chun has been gathering them for months, preparing for exactly this kind of battle. Every ship out there represents a world the Coalition thought they had eliminated. The Altari fleet commander, war leader Sithik, found his perfectly ordered battle plans disintegrating as rapidly as his fleet formations. The electromagnetic interference that the Kithare had generated was preventing coordinated withdrawal, while human ships appeared to be emerging from hyperspace at will throughout the system. Worse, his long-range sensors were detecting additional fleet elements approaching from outside the system. War leader, his tactical officer, reported with barely controlled panic. Human reinforcements continue arriving. Current count is over 300 vessels, with more emerging every few minutes. These aren't refugee ships. They're military formations with coordinated command structures. Sithik's elongated skull pulsed with the color patterns that indicated extreme stress among his species. The Altari had built their reputation on overwhelming force and careful preparation. This battle was supposed to be a simple demonstration of coalition power, a way to remind the galaxy that challenging their authority led inevitably to extinction. Instead, they were facing an enemy that had turned their own tactics against them. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated that human military capability had been eliminated 3 months ago. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Velith, the Kithare xenobiologist who had first examined Marcus, had been monitoring Coalition communications since the battle began. Her harmonic voice carried a note of scientific satisfaction as she explained what they were witnessing. Admiral Korveth, the Coalition's error was assuming that destroying human colonies would eliminate human military capacity. They attacked fixed installations and population centers, but the humans had apparently dispersed their fleet elements throughout space before the attacks began. What we're seeing is the reconcentration of a military force that was never actually destroyed. Admiral Chen's voice confirmed the analysis. All coalition forces, you are now surrounded and outnumbered 3-1. Your standard doctrine calls for retreat and regrouping when facing these odds. However, retreat is not an option today. You threaten to exterminate the Cathar people for the crime of showing mercy. Humanity does not forgive genocide, and we do not allow threats against our allies to go unpunished. The human fleet began a maneuver that no coalition commander had ever witnessed before. Instead of pressing their advantage with a direct assault, they formed a sphere around the remaining coalition forces. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed, but escape was not an option. But the most devastating moment came when Admiral Chen opened a communication channel directly to War Leader Sithik. The human's image appeared on the Altari flagship's main display, and her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. War Leader Sithik of the Sovereignty Coalition, I am Admiral Sarah Chun, formerly of the Earth Defense Force, currently commanding the combined human resistance fleets. 3 months ago, your forces attacked human colonies across 17 systems, killing 4 billion people and scattering countless more. Today, you attempted to repeat that genocide against the Cathar. Sithik's response carried the arrogance that had defined coalition policy for centuries. Human Admiral, your species was judged a threat to galactic stability. The coalition maintains order through strength. Your survival is an aberration that will be corrected. Admiral Chen's expression never changed, but something in her eyes made even hardened Cathar observers step back from their displays. War Leader, you misunderstand your situation. This is not a battle between the coalition and humanity. This is a trial for crimes against sentient life, and you have been found guilty. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. Admiral Chun didn't order an attack. Instead, she did something far more terrifying. She gave the coalition forces exactly what they had given humanity 3 months earlier: a choice between surrender and total destruction. Coalition forces, you have 30 minutes to signal your surrender. Any vessel that attempts to flee will be destroyed. Any vessel that refuses to surrender will be destroyed. Any vessel that targets civilian populations will result in the immediate execution of your entire fleet. These are the same options you gave human colonies. Choose wisely. The coalition faced a dilemma they had never encountered before. Their entire strategic doctrine was based on the assumption that they would always possess overwhelming force. Surrender was not a concept that existed in their military protocols because they had never faced defeat. But the alternative was the complete annihilation of the most powerful fleet they had ever assembled. War Leader Sithik found himself in the impossible position of having to make a decision that could define the fate of 6 different species. Surrender would mean acknowledging that the coalition was not invincible, that their centuries of dominance could be challenged by species they had dismissed as inferior. Continuing to fight would mean watching his fleet be systematically destroyed by enemies who had learned to use coalition strengths against them. The decision was made for him when his own tactical officer, a young Altari whose scientific training had taught him to value data over ideology, provided an analysis that shattered every assumption the coalition had made about this conflict. War Leader, long-range sensors have detected additional human fleet elements in 17 neighboring systems. These forces represent military capacity equivalent to our entire combined fleet. The humans didn't just survive our attacks. They used our own aggression to unite their scattered forces into a military alliance that exceeds our ability to counter. Admiral Koroveth, monitoring coalition communications through the sensor arrays that Marcus had helped design, received confirmation of what she had begun to suspect. This battle wasn't just about the defense of Keith Prime. It was about the emergence of humanity as a major galactic power and the beginning of the end for coalition dominance. Marcus, she asked quietly, is this what your people planned from the beginning? The human's response carried a sadness that transcended species barriers. No, I admitted. We wanted to be left alone to build our colonies and explore the galaxy peacefully. But when someone tries to exterminate your entire species, you learn to fight back with everything you have. Admiral Chun and the other commanders spent 3 months turning our greatest weakness, being scattered across multiple systems, into our greatest strength. Every attack the Coalition made taught us more about their tactics and capabilities. The 30-minute deadline passed with devastating results for the Coalition. Less than 30% of their ships signaled surrender. The remainder chose to fight, apparently believing that Coalition superiority would allow them to break through the human encirclement. They were catastrophically wrong. The human fleet didn't just attack the defiant Coalition ships. They demonstrated tactics and technologies that revealed the true extent of human adaptation during their months of apparent defeat. Weapons that could target specific ship systems rather than attempting to destroy entire vessels. Electronic warfare capabilities that turned Coalition communications networks into weapons against them. And, most devastatingly, the ability to coordinate hundreds of ships with the precision that the Coalition had once believed was their exclusive advantage. The battle that followed was less a military engagement than a demonstration of what happened when a species bred for survival faced enemies who had grown complacent through centuries of easy victories. Human ships moved through Coalition formations like surgical instruments, disabling key vessels while avoiding unnecessary destruction. They weren't fighting to eliminate their enemies. They were fighting to prove that Coalition dominance was over. The moment that defined the new galactic order came when the last Coalition dreadnought, Sithic's flagship Eternal Dominion, found itself alone and surrounded by human vessels. Admiral Chen opened a final communication channel to the Altari war leader, and her words would be quoted in diplomatic protocols for centuries to come. War leader Sithic, your fleet has been defeated. Your ideology of racial superiority has been proven false. Your threats of genocide have been answered with justice. This battle ends now, but the message it sends will echo throughout the galaxy. Humanity has allies. Humanity remembers debts. And humanity does not forgive the attempted extermination of innocent people. Sithic's surrender, transmitted on all frequencies and witnessed by sensor arrays throughout the galaxy, marked the end of Coalition invincibility. But, more importantly, it marked the beginning of an alliance between species who had learned that survival often depended not on strength alone, but on the willingness to stand beside those who shared their values. As the surviving Coalition ships powered down their weapons and prepared for whatever fate awaited them, Admiral Koroveth opened a private channel to Admiral Chen. Admiral, the Keithara people will never forget what your species has done for us today. How may we repay this debt? Admiral Chen's response established the foundation for what would become the most powerful alliance in galactic history. Admiral, the debt was repaid the moment your people saved Marcus instead of leaving him to die. Today, we defended each other. Tomorrow, we build something that will ensure no species ever again faces the choice between extinction and surrender. The Battle of Keith Prime was over. The war for the future of galactic civilization was just beginning. 5 years after the Battle of Keith Prime, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable to the ancient species who had once dominated interstellar politics through fear and overwhelming force. The Coalition's defeat had sent shockwaves through every civilized system, but it was what happened after the victory that truly changed everything. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching construction ships from 17 different species working together to complete humanity's first permanent embassy in Keithara space. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human adaptive technology merged with Keithara precision manufacturing and enhanced by innovation from dozens of species who had quietly joined what was becoming known as the Alliance of Memory. Admiral, came a familiar voice from behind her. Marcus, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic liaison to the Keithara government, approached with a datapad containing the daily intelligence briefings. The morning reports are particularly interesting today. The Vorth Collective has formally requested membership in the Alliance. That makes 43 species who have joined since Keith Prime. Chun accepted the datapad and reviewed the information with satisfaction. The Vorth had been one of the Coalition's most loyal members, their crystalline computer networks providing tactical coordination for countless military operations. Their decision to abandon the Coalition represented a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. Any word from the Altari homeworlds? The Sovereignty Council remains officially neutral, but our intelligence assets report significant internal debate. The younger generation apparently sees the Alliance as the future of galactic politics, while the older leadership still believes they can restore Coalition dominance through diplomacy rather than force. Chen nodded, unsurprised by the report. The Altari had ruled through carefully calculated displays of overwhelming power for over 1,000 years. Accepting that their era of dominance was over would require a fundamental rethinking of their entire civilization's worldview. The transformation had begun immediately after the Battle of Keith Prime, when the captured coalition ships were not destroyed or converted to human military use as expected. Instead, Admiral Chun had made a decision that stunned military observers throughout the galaxy. She had returned them to their original crews with a single condition. They would carry a message throughout coalition space. That message was simple but revolutionary. Species that joined the Alliance of Memory would receive protection from aggression, access to advanced technologies, and, most importantly, the guarantee that their debts and obligations would be remembered and honored for as long as their civilizations endured. The Alliance offered something that the Coalition had never provided, the security that came from being valued rather than merely tolerated. The response had been immediate and overwhelming. Species that had lived in fear of coalition retribution for centuries suddenly found themselves with an alternative. The Zelthian Electronic Warfare Federation had been the first to formally join, bringing with them sensor technologies that complemented human tactical innovation perfectly. The Corlani fast attack clans had followed, contributing their unmatched expertise in high-speed space combat. But it was the smaller species, the ones who had been forced to choose between submission and extinction under coalition rule, whose membership had truly defined the Alliance's character. The Threnodai Archive Keepers brought with them the most complete historical records in the galaxy. The Meckler engineering collectives contributed manufacturing techniques that revolutionized shipbuilding across Alliance space. The ISEC meditation councils provided philosophical frameworks that helped diverse species find common ground despite radically different evolutionary backgrounds. Admiral, Marcus continued, Admiral Koroveth is requesting a meeting this afternoon. She says the Defense Council has approved a proposal that will interest you greatly. Chun followed Marcus through the station's corridors, noting how naturally the architecture accommodated beings from multiple species. Keith RA engineering efficiency blended seamlessly with human adaptability, while design elements from allied species created spaces that felt welcoming to radically different forms of life. It was a physical manifestation of what the Alliance had accomplished on a galactic scale, proof that cooperation could create something greater than any individual achievement. Admiral Koroveth waited in the diplomatic conference room, her four arms working across multiple data displays, while her third eye monitored additional information streams. Age had only enhanced her natural dignity, and her role as one of the Alliance's founding members had given her a status that transcended species boundaries. Admiral Chun, Marcus, please join me. I have news that will reshape our understanding of current galactic politics. The main display activated, showing a star map that highlighted recent intelligence gathered by Alliance scout ships. Red indicators marked coalition strongholds that remained loyal to the old order, while blue markers showed Alliance member systems. But it was the yellow indicators that caught Chen's attention, neutral systems that were apparently requesting meetings with Alliance representatives. Admiral Koroveth explained, our intelligence network has identified 17 systems where local governments are secretly negotiating with both the coalition and the Alliance. They're trying to determine which side represents the future of galactic civilization. Marcus studied the display with growing excitement. These aren't minor systems, Admiral. Several of these are major trade nexuses and manufacturing centers. If they join the Alliance, the coalition loses access to nearly 30% of their economic base. Chun absorbed the implications while considering the broader strategic picture. The Alliance had grown far beyond what anyone had anticipated after Keith Prime, but their expansion had been largely defensive in nature. Member species joined seeking protection from coalition aggression or retribution. This intelligence suggested something far more significant. Entire regions of the galaxy were actively choosing the Alliance model over coalition dominance. Admiral Koroveth, what does the Defense Council propose? A diplomatic offensive unlike anything in galactic history. We want to demonstrate that the Alliance represents more than just military protection. We want to show these neutral systems what cooperative civilization can accomplish. The plan that emerged from the subsequent discussions would have been impossible under the old galactic order. Rather than sending military fleets or making threats of economic sanctions, the alliance would send something unprecedented: combined scientific and humanitarian missions that would address specific problems in each neutral system. The Threnody archive keepers would share their historical databases to help resolve ancient territorial disputes. Keith RA engineers would work with local governments to improve industrial efficiency and environmental protection. Human medical specialists would collaborate with native healers to address public health challenges. Most importantly, these missions would operate openly, with full documentation and complete transparency about their methods and objectives. The message, Admiral Koroveth explained, is that Alliance membership means gaining access to the combined knowledge and capabilities of 43 different civilizations, each one contributing their unique strengths to solve common problems. Marcus reviewed the target list and recognized several systems where human colonies had once existed before Coalition attacks. Admiral, this approach could demonstrate something the Coalition never understood. When you help people solve their problems instead of threatening them with worse problems, they tend to remember who their real friends are. The diplomatic offensive began 6 months later with results that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. The neutral systems didn't just request alliance membership. They began actively recruiting their neighbors to consider joining as well. The effect was similar to watching a control chain reaction spread through the galaxy. But the most significant victory came from an unexpected source. The Nexary Siege Platform Confederation, one of the Coalition's most militarily powerful members, formally requested a meeting with Alliance leadership. Their message, transmitted on diplomatic frequencies and monitored by intelligence services throughout the galaxy, represented a fundamental shift in the balance of power. Admiral Chun received the Nexary delegation aboard Unity Station, knowing that their decision would influence dozens of other species who were still uncertain about the future of galactic politics. The Nexary ambassador, a massive being whose natural armor made them virtually indestructible in ground combat, delivered a message that would reshape interstellar relations for generations. Admiral Chun, I am Warbuilder Korthax of the Nexary Confederation. My people have served the Coalition for 800 years, believing that strength and dominance represented the natural order of galactic civilization. The Battle of Keith Prime demonstrated that this belief was false. Today, we come seeking membership in an alliance that values contribution over conquest. Chin's response was carefully calculated to acknowledge the significance of the moment, while establishing the principles that would govern future alliance expansion. Warbuilder Korthax, the alliance welcomes all species who are willing to honor their debts, remember their obligations, and contribute to the collective security of peaceful civilizations. The Nexary Confederation's military expertise will be valued, but only in service of protecting member species from aggression, not advancing conquest. The ceremony that formalized Nexary membership in the Alliance was broadcast throughout the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who were trying to understand how the established order of galactic politics had changed so dramatically in such a short time. The sight of Nexary siege platforms, once symbols of coalition might, operating alongside human ships and Keithara defensive platforms, sent a clear message. The Alliance was no longer just a defensive coalition of smaller species. It had become a genuine alternative to coalition dominance. The coalition's response was swift and predictable. Economic sanctions against Alliance member systems, military exercises near Alliance borders, and diplomatic pressure on neutral systems to reject Alliance overtures. But these traditional tactics, which had maintained coalition control for centuries, proved ineffective against an alliance that had learned to turn weakness into strength. Alliance member species had developed economic networks that reduced their dependence on coalition trade routes. Military cooperation between allied fleets had created defensive capabilities that could counter coalition aggression without requiring offensive operations. Most importantly, the alliance's diplomatic approach had built relationships based on mutual benefit rather than fear, creating loyalty that could not be broken by threats or bribes. The final confrontation came not as a military battle, but as a choice that crystallized the fundamental difference between coalition and alliance philosophies. The Altari Sovereignty Council issued an ultimatum that would define the future of galactic civilization. Neutral systems must choose between coalition membership and complete isolation from Altari space. Admiral Chen's response, delivered from Unity Station and transmitted throughout the galaxy, established the principles that would govern interstellar relations for centuries to come. Species of the galaxy, you face a choice that will determine the future of all sentient life among the stars. The Coalition offers you a galaxy where might makes right, where the strong dominate the weak, and where survival depends on the whims of ancient empires that see you as subjects rather than equals. The Alliance offers you something different, a galaxy where debts are remembered and honored, where cooperation creates strength, and where every species contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. The choice was made by billions of beings across thousands of worlds, but the result was unmistakable. Within 2 years of the Battle of Keith Prime, over 60% of galactic civilization had joined the Alliance of Memory. The Coalition, reduced to its core founding species and a handful of loyal clients, found itself isolated and increasingly irrelevant in a galaxy that had moved beyond the politics of domination. Standing once again on Unity Station's observation deck, Admiral Chun watched ships from over 100 different species working together to construct the first joint research facility in galactic history. The project would study methods of stellar engineering that could transform entire solar systems. But, more importantly, it represented proof that cooperative civilization could accomplish things that no single species could achieve alone. Marcus joined her at the viewing port, both humans contemplating how far their species had traveled from the desperate refugees they had been 5 years earlier. Admiral, the monthly reports show that Alliance territory now encompasses over 70% of inhabited systems. The debt has been repaid beyond anything the Keith RA could have imagined when they rescued me from that escape pod. Admiral Chin smiled, recognizing the truth in Marcus's observation while understanding something deeper about the nature of debt and obligation. Marcus, the debt will never be fully repaid because it keeps growing. Every species we help creates new obligations. Every alliance we form creates new responsibilities. Every victory we achieve creates new opportunities to demonstrate that memory and gratitude are more powerful than fear and domination. She gestured toward the construction ships working together in perfect harmony despite representing dozens of different evolutionary paths. The Keith RA saved one human life and gained an alliance that spans the galaxy. We've learned that the universe keeps very careful accounts, and the interest on kindness compounds faster than the cost of cruelty. As if summoned by their conversation, Admiral Koroveth's voice came through the station's communication system. All Alliance personnel, this is Admiral Koroveth with an announcement that will be of interest to our human allies especially. Long-range exploration ships have discovered the location of Earth, humanity's original homeworld. The system is uninhabited, the planet itself restored to natural conditions after Coalition bombardment. The Alliance Council has voted unanimously to support human efforts to reclaim and rebuild their ancestral home. Chun felt emotions that she had kept carefully controlled for 5 years suddenly threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. Earth, the world where humanity had first looked up at the stars and dreamed of finding friends among them. The Coalition had turned it into a monument to the futility of resisting their dominance. Now it would become something else entirely. Proof that no defeat was permanent, no debt forgotten, and no act of kindness ever truly lost. Marcus, prepare a message to all Alliance fleets. The journey home begins now, and when we arrive at Earth, we'll carry with us the gratitude of 100 different species, each one proof that the galaxy remembers those who stand by their obligations. The Alliance of Memory had begun with a single human survivor and a Keith RA captain who chose mercy over caution. It had grown into a galactic civilization founded on the radical proposition that debt and gratitude were more powerful forces than fear and domination. And now it would carry humanity home, accompanied by friends beyond counting and united by the simple understanding that some things truly were worth remembering forever. In the depths of space, the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself approved of what its children had accomplished when they chose cooperation over conquest, memory over forgetting, and hope over despair. The debt would never be fully repaid, because kindness, once shared, multiplied beyond all calculation. And throughout the galaxy, ancient species who had ruled through fear learned a new truth that would define the rest of galactic history. The most dangerous beings in the universe were not those who threatened destruction, but those who remembered every kindness and repaid every debt with compound interest measured in loyalty, friendship, and the unshakable conviction that no one who stood beside them would ever stand alone.